view is better.
I'm going to share the screen anyways.
You want to go ahead and share your screen now?
Yeah, sure.
Ready? All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. Today's topic is about digital prototyping and twinning. Today's event is brought to you by University Lab Partners, and now I'm just going to pass it over to our speakers for today's. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome. My name is Leyla Mirmomen. I am the founder and CEO of Optimuos, and I have almost 20 years of experience in product development, starting from concept development, engineering design, physical prototyping, and testing. And my training is in engineering and management. And shockingly, in Optimuos, we are doing product development again. But this time, we built virtual prototype and virtual twin. Here with me is Professor Vitreous Gel, the Chief Scientist of Optimuos, and also a UCLA professor. I leave it to him to introduce himself. Please, Vitreous.
Hey everyone, I'm Vitreous Gel. I'm a professor of mechanical aerospace engineering and bioengineering at UCLA. Been there for nearly 20 years, and I'm gladly joined forces with Optimuos to do all this prototyping and digital prototyping using the state-of-the-art technologies that are now available to us. So, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, I would like to, first of all, before we start this talk, I would like to start with defining a digital prototype, what a digital prototype and what a digital twin is, as these words are widely used in different industries for different applications. The digital prototype and digital twin that we are using here is a virtual representation that mimics the behavior, functionality, and characteristics of physical product and system. And that can be used for product development that we are here to talk about it. I'm sure the question that, thank you. I'm sure this question comes to mind, that how we can use digital prototype. We are already using conventional methods of product development, and there's a lot of challenge in the product development methods. It's very time consuming, it's very expensive. It's just infinite iteration of the prototype need to be built till we get to the point that we are happy with the device. And we don't want to add another challenge to this path. And it's the right question to know how digital prototype can contribute to the product development. And we are here to explain to you how. Unfortunately, product development is one of the industries that is so far behind in digitalization. And that's why we are experiencing a lot of challenges in our path in product development. And many of great innovation fail to get to the market because of these challenges. And it's sort of product development for MedTech and BioTech and other industries become a bottleneck for innovations. As the market pace is pretty fast, many innovators just either give up, or they run out of money, or they fail to bring their product to the market on time. I'm sure that many of these failures have been, you heard about it. Also, Vitreous has a first-hand experience of one of these failures that he would like to share with you guys.
Well, it was a COVID time. We partnered with a couple of other experts in the field. We developed this device called BlowFISH. The BlowFISH device was a device that was capable of capturing viruses or coronavirus in that application from exhale breath. So we were able to use this technology to detect COVID without using nasal swab or saliva. It would show the effect of infectiousness, and it was very early on in the process that we started the company. Actually, Dr. Mirmomen raised money for us. She was in charge of the business side of that company. We raised the money, but during COVID, so things were a little bit complicated with manufacturing and prototyping. And we were actually able to make a prototype, as you can see in the middle of the screen. And we did some tests in Louisiana. During that time, we have many iterations to get to the ward that we want. During that time, when we were LA based, actually LA rate of COVID came down. So we didn't actually have enough samples to test on. So we sent the devices to Louisiana. We actually did a test and we were able to match it with the nasal swab accurately. So it was very successful. The first time the exhale breath sample actually was not only captured the virus, we were able to sequence it. So it was very exciting. And we were invited by FDA to submit a EUA. So we did a pre-EUA, which was approved. And we were ready to do the trials. However, by that time, there was nothing available anymore. COVID waves are all gone, and we didn't have anything to do, so we folded the company.
Yeah, the problem was that you needed your devices to be ready on time, and because minor changes required a long time for the device. So this device is not very complex, but just printing, to be printed or to be manufactured. And this time, unfortunately, worked against you guys and and the company. Can you go to the next slide? But that's where digital prototype comes to the table, and that's what digital twin and digital prototype aims to do, to cut the number of iterations and minimize the number of iterations needed to get to the physical prototype in terms of design to satisfactory for a medical device for the regulatory base and also to get the functionality that we want. So
I'm sorry,
that's okay. So this is slide, I want to connect that slide to this slide, and now we are here, is I would like to talk about how a digital prototype twin can contribute in the product development path for specifically MedTech and BioTech companies. What you see here is a very high-level journey that an idea form and a concept will start developing, go through till it gets to the commercial part. So it's to start from the discovery, concept development, research and prototyping, verification and validation, regulatory, and also manufacturing and commercialization. It's a very high level. To me, based on our experience, digital prototype can help in all of these stages. Starting from concept, we are having clients that we are helping them to co-development their concept. If they have the idea formed in their mind, they have like put together very basic elements of their concept in their lab, and they came to us and we are helping them to have a better insight about the how that concept can go. And till the end, when you have the product commercialized and is in the market to reflect the voice of the customer. But today I'm going to stick only to the stages that are involved in product development for innovation that wants to become product. So starting from research and prototyping, while you're doing research and you're developing your concept to make it representable or having your proof of concept ready for test, if you start building your digital prototype, if you have your digital prototype, it gives you a very good insight to optimize your design. But I'm going to ask you to chime in and add more to
I mean, going back to the example of BlowFISH, when we started and raised money, we had device discovery and concept nailed down. But when it got to the research and prototyping, we basically suffered through building the prototype, testing it to see how effective it is, go back for the prototyping, spend money on those, retest it, keep doing this iteration using manufacturing because there was no other way around it. And not only that, because it was during pandemic, there was a long waiting time also for manufacturing. So that extended both, and they charge extra to get ahead of the line for
Yeah,
manufacturing.
and if you had like that virtual prototype, you could run multiple of these scenarios virtually and get to the optimal one and the most feasible one. And when you're more sure, you could prepare the design and send it for production. So I have to add here that a digital prototype doesn't mean that you don't need a physical prototype. It means that you minimize the number of physical prototypes that you need, which is cut through the time that you have to spend on it and save cost. Also, we can use it for validation and verification. Definitely, we can run multiple virtual tests, specifically the tests that physically are really expensive and you might not have access to it. We minimize the number of tests that is required for approval of the performance and functionality of the device.
I mean, one of the key, exactly to your point, during the research and prototyping, you change the parameter because you think that parameter is going to improve the performance. Because if everything points to that direction, you send it for prototyping, it comes back, it improves what you think it would improve, but it changes something else that works against you. So in a digital prototype, you can tweak multi-parameters without spending money on prototyping and see how it converts to the performance target that you're looking for. Then you send it for the prototyping. We save a lot of money and time that direction.
Yeah. And the other stage that I actually really like the contribution of digital prototype is the regulatory stage. In regulatory stage, the first steps of applying for the FDA, you need to run a clinical trial for proving that the device is safe and regulatory compliant. And it's not the real clinical trial. It's just like the basic documentation needs to be ready for opening the conversation with FDA. For that, recently FDA identified simulation as a tool to de-risk the technology and show the performance of the technology and called it in silico trial. That's exactly what digital prototype can do, and it's a great deal of help to expedite the regulatory submission and also cut the cost that we all know is really expensive, and rule out the unnecessary clinical trial and make you just run the clinical trial that's needed for proven testing.
To your point, I want to say something which you're more familiar because you were running that side. If you remember, the investors were pushing us to do a lot of things faster because they wanted to have a shorter time for the product, and we just couldn't. And from what my conversation with other companies, that's always the case.
Yeah.
Because they really want to get to the product, at least working prototype, much earlier in time. So that's a big challenge for many of these.
I think Medtronic also is within the few companies who run in silico trial with one of the in vivo technologies for heart.
I think it was one of the stents that approved, I think instead of 5 or 6 years or 10 years, it took 2 years.
Actually, Siemens run a study that if we use digital twin for product development, we at least going to save 5% of total cost, and definitely get some money. We also work with Siemens, Siemens tools to build digital twinning, and that's some other day we can walk you through the application and how useful it is. Here, now the question is, when is the best time to start building your digital twin? As I mentioned to you, we can start as early as the time that you're developing the concept. This diagram here been inspired by Six Sigma. I consider only 3 first stage of the product development here, as you see. And in each stage, we have multiple different tasks that needs to run in parallel, because the result and the outcome of each of these tasks affect our concept development and our decision making. And when we start building a digital prototype early on in the stage 1, we're going to get to that how we are building it, and you get that more understanding how it's possible. All of these inputs can be implemented into the digital prototype. And as we are growing and developing our technology, this prototype is also grown by time and the data that we are implemented in it. and become at the end a digital representation of digital twin of your technology that can be really helpful for research, for development, for new generation of the device. And you can have it during the lifetime of the product. And later on, we get to how useful it can be for you for commercialization as well. So how it starts? It starts easily. You can have a customer requirement, you can have an idea, you can have a preliminary design, you can have a napkin drawing, you can have just a physics-based equation, or you can have a boundary limitation, and any information you have, we can start building the structure of the model. And that model, as I mentioned to you, is going to grow to become a digital prototype and twin that can be used for proof of concept operation, testing, diagnostic, and also optimization. In the next slide, I want to get into how this digital twin can be built so you become more familiar with the steps need to be taken. This is very high level of the activities need to be done for the digital twin to be built, and why as early as that, why we can start doing it in very early stage of the development cycle. And I want to ask you to walk you through it, and then maybe I can chime in on the state of an art of technology that we are developing, methodology that we are developing to make this more even easier. Please go on.
Sure. So as Leyla noted, we started preliminary design. If there's a working device, actually, we can get inspired by that too. Customer requirements, target performance targets. Basically, we started digital model or simulation, physics-based simulation. We can try different geometries, physical parameters, even some experimental data to build this parametric study, and also sensitivity study, make a multi-physics simulation, which basically what is currently being done for many cases for some components that is of interest. It's being done for what it's worth. However, if there is experimental data existing, so there's already a first or second prototype that exists, there are tons of experimental data can be derived from that and put that in the machine learning algorithms. And because that's a high fidelity data, that's actual performance of the data. So we have this data-driven simulations that's not physics-based, but it comes right from the behavior of the machine. So when we have this data-driven model and a physics-based model from numerical simulation and modeling, we do something called hybridization, combining these two to take advantage of high fidelity of a data and physics-based behavior that you're looking for from the simulation. We have the data-driven physics-based simulation.
I have to stop you here and add if there is any question regarding the fact that there is not enough data available. That's exactly what we are doing at the moment. We mentioned about that boundary condition, but we have techniques that can be used to augment data, or because I'm going to ask you to explain about PIN as well.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you only have data. The physics space is not very well understood. So what you use, you do physics informed neural networks. So basically, all the data that you have available, you have some ideas about the physics, but not much you can do with solving it. The problem is so complex. So we use PINs, which is a physics informed neural networks. It's purely data-based simulation when you have no option whatsoever to do the physics-based simulation. So there are three levels you can look at. One is purely physics-based simulation, what is purely data-driven simulation, or PINs in this case, or combining the two with a data-driven physics-based.
Yeah, and in some cases we can actually augment data as well,
sure,
depending on the situation. And moving forward, we have like our can we go back to that slide? Yeah, to that high fidelity simulation that then gradually, by training and interfacing with the physical prototype that we are building, or the real device that's existing and is working, become the digital twin, which is the virtual representation device working exactly like the device. We prepared a case study to give like a better understanding of how this digital twin works and how it can be utilized for different applications. So maybe we can start.
Yeah, before the case study, I just quickly talk about how the data and physics-based simulation can get combined. So what you see on the top left of the plot is a simple behavior of a physics-based simulation. Is that some oscillatory behavior that damps out. Now, if that's a physics-based simulation with a given boundary condition, that's a really way of looking at how the system behaves. However, if we have experimental data, as we've shown down in the plot below, that those dots are from some experimental data, that it does a similar behavior, but there are a couple of things that are different. One is there's a drift in experimental data, which means if the average of the output data in simulation shows it's a constant value, in this case, that value is actually reduced. And then also there is offset in the data. So they're not overlapping each other. There's a difference between them as well. So even though physics-based simulation capture most of the behavior, it doesn't fully capture what's going on in the given experiment. Now, when we do hybridization, we combine these two through neural network. And what you see is on the right is actually we are able to have this physics-based behavior, but it's data-driven, that actually capture exactly what happens in experiment. And because we can do that, if the drift is an issue somebody want to address in the experimental setup, you know where the source of this is and can be addressed, or anything else, any complexity, which otherwise wasn't covered in a physics-based simulation. Now, just give you an example for something that we have done before. So we used to look at, or still do, Vitreous Gel, which is a liquid, it's a gel inside the human eye, or many other eyes. It's very important because this gel is very delicate. When it goes bad, a lot of different diseases happen in the eye, including retina detachment. There are many other floaters and so on. So it's very important to characterize this gel. But if you want to take the gel out of the eye, things get really complicated. Even if you want to use eyes from the animals, for example, pig eyes, that fluid, when you take it off to try to test it to see how this works, it's not going to be the same as intact vitreous inside the eye. So we built this device on the left, what's called rheometer, which usually being used to characterize viscoelastic fluid. We make this probe on the right, which is actually goes inside the eye, pig eye, not human eye, that you get this fresh eye, go inside, basically characterize viscoelastic behavior of the system. So this is the experimental data that we would get. There's some, again, issues with the experiment. We weren't sure what exactly the characteristics come from. So we went back and we did a digital twin of the rheometer. So if the rheometer was this, and basically, as you can see here, the probe would go inside of a pig eye to do the simulation. This is the experimental data on the right. And what you see up there, the digital twin exactly mimic the behavior of the experimental setup with the same gel. So because we were able to use digital twin in this case, we actually knew certain uncertainties that we get from the experimental data. Where are the sources? Is that actually behavior of the vitreous itself, or the machine have issues that we need to address? And that's what happened. Actually, this become a patent that in a negotiation to be licensed at currently. So, Leyla.
Yeah, these are the structure of our team. We have different experts in different areas, as you see here. And we have access to Complex Rate Lab and also to the
many others,
biology lab. And I didn't bring my right glasses. So what I don't see here, I don't see there. So, and so we have can get different projects starting from devices, complex component, new material that can be used for MedTech and BioTech purposes. And also recently we are working also on tissue that help them develop a new solution for a compromised tissue. Yeah, this is much